It's that time of year again. The NFL playoffs are just a week away. We're here in Week 18 trying to decide the final playoff picture, and today I'm going to give you a breakdown of all of the potential playoff scenarios, plus an update of what the overall picture looks like. Now, compared to last year's Week 18, things aren't as chaotic, there aren't as many potential results, and it's a bit easier to digest. But we're going to take a look at all the scenarios, as some interesting ones could certainly play out, but before that, let's take a look at the standings. In the AFC, 9 teams still remain. Of those 9, the first 6 that you see have all already clinched a playoff berth. And for the most part, seeding has already been decided, with the Chiefs locking up the 1 seed, the Bills locking up the 2 seed, and the Texans locking up 4. The only potential movement that could happen is the Ravens, Steelers, Chargers, Broncos, Dolphins, and Bengals. That's where things could get a little interesting. And here's the NFC, where 6 teams have already clinched the playoff berth, just like in the AFC, only 1 spot is still up for grabs. But unlike in the AFC, there could still be a lot of movement. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles are locked into the 2 seed. But all the other spots that you see on the screen could shift between various teams. Let's talk about how all of these scenarios could potentially unfold, starting with the AFC situations. The big thing to talk about is, of course, the final spot, the 7 seed. Either the Broncos, Dolphins, or Bengals could all take it. As of right now, the Broncos hold that spot, holding a 1-game advantage over the likes of Cincy and Miami. And all they need to do is win their game against the Chiefs in Week 18, and they're in. Simple as that. And considering the Chiefs will be playing primarily backups, things at least on the surface should be looking pretty good for Denver. Now, alternatively, they could also get in if both the Dolphins and Bengals lose to their Week 18 opponents. But let's just say, knowing who the Dolphins play, they probably don't want this to escape their own control. For my playoff hopefuls, the Dolphins and Bengals fans out there, you need a Broncos loss first and foremost. The Dolphins currently hold a tiebreaker win over the Bengals, so if the Dolphins win and the Broncos lose, even if the Bengals were to also win, then the Dolphins would get this spot with a Week 18 win over the Jets. The Jets suck, so maybe that's not a concern, but what could be a concern is whether or not Tua plays due to some health concerns. And then there's the Bengals, the team that I'd say a lot of people probably want to make the playoffs, knowing how great Joe Burrow has been this year. Unfortunately, they have the toughest road of all, needing both a Broncos and Dolphins loss, plus a win over the Pittsburgh Steelers, who still have a chance to win their own division, which we'll talk about in just a moment. This is a brutal stretch for the Cincinnati Bengals. It's possible, but it doesn't look very good for them. One of these 3 teams will walk away with the 7 seed, and that's about as good as it gets thanks to tiebreakers. Speaking of tiebreakers, the AFC North crown is still up for grabs here in Week 18. The Ravens and the Steelers both have an opportunity still. If the Ravens want to win the North and claim the 3 seed, all they need to do is either beat the Cleveland Browns or hope for a Pittsburgh Steelers loss or tie. Considering they're playing the tank commander Browns led by DTR, you're probably feeling pretty good if you're a Baltimore fan right about now. On the other side of things, the Steelers can win the AFC North with a win over the Cincinnati Bengals and a loss for the Ravens against Cleveland. Then they'd flip, and the Ravens would end up being the 5 seed. Now, in the result that the Steelers end up being a wildcard team, they'll be either a 5 or 6 seed. It all depends on what happens in their matchup against the Bengals, as well as the Chargers who are going up against the Raiders. Now, if the Ravens clinch the North, but the Steelers still win, they'll be locked into the 5 seed for sure. But they could also clinch it with a Chargers loss against the Raiders, or if both teams were to tie. However, if the Steelers lose and the Chargers get either a win or tie, these 2 teams would flip-flop in this scenario. And genuinely, I think both teams are going to want that 5 seed, as it's a very desirable matchup against a struggling Texans team, rather than heading over to play Baltimore. But that's pretty much how things could go in the AFC. Most teams are already locked into their positioning, so there's only a couple of things that could really change at this point. In the NFC, there's a bit more of an opportunity for some movement to happen. The big decider here is seeing who ends up winning the NFC South, either the Atlanta Falcons or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Currently, the Bucs hold a 1-game advantage over Atlanta, and all they need is a win or tie in their matchup against the New Orleans Saints in Week 18, and the division will be theirs. But on the other side of things, if the Bucs were to somehow lose and the Falcons win their matchup against the Panthers, it'll be Atlanta moving on to the playoffs and claiming the divisional crown. Now, depending on who wins the division, it is going to slightly decide how the overall seeding order works. In the result that the Buccaneers win their game and the Rams end up losing to the Seahawks in Week 18, we'll see the Buccaneers move up to the 3 seed and the Rams down to 4, but alternatively, if the Falcons win the division, they are locked into 4 no matter what. If you're a Bucs fan though, you're probably feeling pretty damn good about yourself making the playoffs considering that you're playing a broken Saints team. Things are looking good over there. Unless they have the choke of the century, they're probably going to the playoffs. And yeah, there's no other way for these NFC South teams to make it. There's no wild card available to them. It's either win the NFC South or you're done. Let's look into some of the other big scenarios though, because there is another division that is on the line in the AFC. Somehow, someway, in Week 18, with two 14-win squads, the NFC North is up for grabs between the Lions and the Vikings. And as if the scriptwriters foresaw this happening 18 weeks into the season, these two happen to be playing each other for the divisional crown. And considering their records, it's as simple as win and you're in. One of these teams is going to move up to 15 wins, and they will end up clinching the number 1 seed in the NFC, getting that very meaningful first round bye. Or alternatively, even though it's not likely, if this game results in a tie, the Lions would win with a tiebreaker. And of course that means the loser in this scenario, be it through a loss or a tiebreaker, will end up being the 5 seed no matter what because they just have so many wins, and they'll be looking at a date with destiny either with the winner of the NFC South or the LA Rams. No matter what happens though, this is a very exciting time. These are two of the 3 best teams in the NFC right now, going head to head in the final week, a potential playoff preview in the making here. This game's going to be sick. Then we have the Philadelphia Eagles. They're locked into the 2 seed no matter what. They can't do anything about it. They'll be looking at a date with destiny either with the Commanders or the Green Bay Packers. Then with the Rams, they already clinched the division because of a crazy tiebreaker. Seattle are already out of the running, but they have a chance to clinch the 3 seed and avoid a matchup with the likes of the Minnesota Vikings or Detroit Lions, so long as they can take care of business and defeat the Seattle Seahawks in Week 18. Otherwise, things could get a bit risky. If they lose and the Buccaneers win, like I said before, these two would flip. And you definitely want to avoid facing a 14-win team in the first round. As for the Commanders and the Packers, it's as simple as this. So long as the Commanders either have a better or the same record as Green Bay, they are going to have the higher seed. No matter what happens in Week 18, if these two are tied, the Commanders will have the tiebreaker thanks to a better overall conference record. The Commanders have a matchup with the Dallas Cowboys, whose season is over, while the Packers are playing arguably one of the worst teams in the league right now in the Chicago Bears. Now, considering the Commanders have already lost to the Cowboys once, there is a possibility that disaster strikes them, and let's just say, kind of like with the Rams and Bucs talking about them earlier and avoiding the Vikings or Lions, you really don't want to be the 7 seed if you're the Pack or Commanders, because you'll be staring down the Eagles in the very first round. And that, my friends, is all the different playoff scenarios, plus the current picture as we head into the final week of football. Like I said before, compared to last year, not as many potential crazy results on the table here, but there's a lot of small intricacies that could end up leading to some massive changes and could ultimately decide the fate of the playoffs thanks to the certain seeding order and everything. It's going to be fun to see how this turns out and if there's any upsets on the horizon. If you're a fan of one of these playoff hopeful teams, I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. And if you enjoyed this video and found this guide helpful, I'd appreciate it a lot if you could give this video a like and subscribe to my channel if you're new for more weekly NFL content.